Hi everyone, it's great to be with you again this morning. Thank you for joining us as we continue our series in the Gospel of Luke called Dr. Luke. Now, if you know the Bible, you'll know that Luke wrote two books. First of all, he wrote the Gospel of Luke, and second of all, he wrote the book of Acts as well. And people would often believe or think that the Gospel of Luke focuses on the ministry of Jesus, and the book of Acts focuses on the ministry of the Holy Spirit. But this morning I would like to share with you about the Holy Spirit, and in particular I would like to focus on the fact that the Gospel of Luke focuses not only on the ministry of Jesus, but Luke in great detail describes the ministry of the Holy Spirit and the work of the Holy Spirit in the Gospel of Luke as well. Now, let me give you some examples. In Luke chapter 1, the story starts with the angel visiting Zechariah. And when the angel visits Zechariah, he says to Zechariah that you'll have a son and that he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even from birth. And then later on in chapter 1, remember the angel Gabriel comes and visits Mary. He tells Mary that she'll have a baby. And Mary says, how can this be? And the angel said to Mary, the Holy Spirit will come upon you. And then after that, Mary went to visit Elizabeth. And when Mary went to visit Elizabeth, Luke writes that Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. And then later on in chapter 1, after Elizabeth gives birth to her son, Zechariah is filled with the Holy Spirit and he prophesies. And then when we go into Luke chapter 2, you'll remember that there was a man called Simeon who was waiting for Messiah. The Holy Spirit had revealed to him that he would not die before he saw Messiah coming. And Luke writes that he was moved by the Holy Spirit. He went into the temple courts and he saw Jesus. And you'll remember that in Luke chapter 3, when John the Baptist is preaching, speaking about Jesus, he said he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. And then later on in Luke chapter 3, at the time of Jesus' baptism, Jesus is praying and the Holy Spirit comes upon him in bodily form like a dove. And then Luke chapter 4, if you remember, Jesus is led by the Holy Spirit into the desert, and Luke writes that he's full of the Holy Spirit. And then after 40 days of fasting, Luke then writes that Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit. And then just at that point in Luke chapter 4, Jesus goes back to Nazareth, his hometown, and you'll remember that he went into the synagogue, he took the scroll, he read from Isaiah the prophet, and he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. And then you'll remember in Luke chapter 5, that's the story when the roof is broken and the paralytic is lowered down into the room that Jesus is ministering in. And Luke writes the power of the Lord was present for Jesus to heal the sick. In other words, the Holy Spirit was present. And then in Luke chapter 10, Luke writes that Jesus was full of joy through the Spirit or through the Holy Spirit. And then in Luke chapter 11, Jesus is teaching on prayer. And just after that, Luke records a parable that Jesus taught. And at the end of it, he says, which of you fathers would give your son a snake if they asked for a fish, or a scorpion if they asked for an egg? If you fathers know how to give a gift, how much more will your Father in heaven give the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? And then in Luke chapter 12, you'll remember that that's when Jesus is speaking about the fact that he who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit won't be forgiven. And then in Luke chapter 12 as well, that's when Jesus says that if you're brought before rulers or synagogues or authorities, don't worry about what to say, because the Holy Spirit will teach you what to say. Now, I hope you can see that throughout the Gospel of Luke, Luke is recording, Luke is writing about the ministry of the Holy Spirit. Remember, even when Jesus was on earth, he was totally dependent on the Holy Spirit. And during the time of Jesus' ministry on earth and just before his birth, the Holy Spirit was already moving in the lives of people like Zechariah and Mary and Elizabeth and Simeon. Now, I'm sharing all that to say this. We desperately need the Holy Spirit in our lives if our lives are to be fruitful. Maybe during the past 6 months of lockdown, maybe you feel that you've become dry, or maybe that you feel that you've not been filled with the Holy Spirit. I would encourage you today to close the door, to spend some time with the Holy Spirit and to ask Him to fill you afresh so that you are not dry or empty, because we desperately need the Holy Spirit in our lives, and Luke communicates that in his gospel. Have a great day. God bless you, and remember, the Holy Spirit loves you so much. He is God and He is a person. God bless you. Bye.